Fur Dude gets his name for a reason, and you're going to work with a variety of grooming tools to add and shape the hair. Using a desktop designed for grooming, you will add Frizz, Clumping, and Hair Dynamics, which will simulate as Fur Dude walks. The end result will be ready to be exported for rendering. Okay, let's go back to the object level, and we're going to take the four objects we have so far that represent the capturing, the rigging, the testing, and the walk cycle. And we're just going to put those into a network box. We're going to call these rig and animate. And they're still here if we ever want to reference them or go back, maybe make changes, re-export a piece. But for now, we're going to move on and start looking at the fur side of things. So we're going to put down a file node, and this file node is going to go and we're going to use that to grab, double click in, we're going to grab the version of the walk cycle that show the whole sequence as one entry, and we accept that. And now we're going to have a walk cycle here based on the animation of Fur Dude. So this is what we're going to add the fur to, but we don't want to add fur to the teeth and the tongue and all that kind of thing. So we're going to strip out part of this so that we can focus on the fur side. So we're going to put a blast node down. So tab blast. And with this node, we're going to, under the group, select the body, so that theoretically only the body is being deleted, and then we'll just invert that with delete non-selected. And now we have the body, but without the other parts. And we're going to call this FD anim. So this is an animated version of Fur Dude. Now we're going to take this and alt-click to drag this over and to make a copy. And we're going to call this one FD rest. So this is a version of Fur Dude that is sort of T-pose. Not that he has arms, so it's not really a T-pose. But anyway, in this case, we're just going to get frame 1. And there we have it. So you'll see there's the rest pose and the animated pose, and they're both sort of existing together. Now we're going to go back to frame 1 on this, just so we can cycle through there. And later we're only going to render from frame 10, because that's where most of the animation is. But for this part, we need all the frames, because we want to simulate from 1 to 10 when we do some dynamics. So to add fur, we're asked to select animated static geometry first, press enter, and then animated geometry and press enter. Thinks about it for a bit, and then it will build a network. And this network will be composed of a bunch of different parts, and we're going to turn most of them off for the moment. And it turns out that we have things sort of reversed here. We're going to put the animation on this side, and we'll put the rest over on this side along with the groom. And what we're going to do is show the groom, show the rest, and we'll work on this a little bit before we worry about motion. So you can either work with this as static or as animated using the setup. So we're going to focus on the groom node, and what we want to do is start adding some sort of overall procedural grooming to this. So we're going to go up to the tool shelf here, and we're going to get set guide length. And this will allow us to determine the length of the fur across the whole character. Now, we want to randomize that a little bit, and we want to have a minimum and a maximum. And so our minimum is going to be 0.03, and we want to assign that based on a texture map. So earlier we built a texture map based on the UVs of the character that allow us to map out areas that we don't want fur. So there's fur length. You can't really tell from here, but we're going to do the same thing for the maximum length, and we're going to change this one to 0.15. And what we're going to see is that the lip area and the bottom of the feet area do not have fur on them, and that is based on the texture map that we have. So we show all objects, we can see we see the bottom of the feet, and the lip areas don't really have fur, but everything else does. So that's pretty much what we want, and that's being done through that texture map. The next thing we want to do is add some bending. So that just gives a nice little bend to the fur. And what we want to do here is, let's set up an angle of, let's say, 45, make it a little more dramatic for what Fur Dude is. And that just bends all of the fur there. Now we're going to add some frizz. Frizz will make the hair look a little bit crazier there. And we'll just put the amplitude down a little bit. We just want it to be more of a subtle effect in here as opposed to being a heavy duty one. But we'll put some randomization in so that there's a little bit more going on. Great. So the next part of the fur that we want to add is the clumping. And so we're going to go over to here, and there's the clumping. And what this does is it takes the fur and puts it into little groups based on an area, and then tightens them together. So we want to make the clump size much smaller. So we're going to go 0.2. So you're not going to see it as much here, but you'll see it later in the rendered fur or the final fur. This is just the guide hairs right now. And then we're going to loosen the tightness. So instead of it coming directly to a point, it's going to just splay out a little bit. It's going to pull in, but it's still going to be loose a little bit at the ends. So now that we have that, we have the basic fur setup that we want. Now we probably, when you set this up, you can decide how many guide curves you want. Because we're going to simulate the guide curves, we're going to add a little bit extra in here just to get make sure we're getting lots of good motion in there. And you can see a little bit more detail in that. And that's where we want to be at this point. Now let's go and hide those two. And we're going to bring out the animation, the deform, and the hair generation. And now we see a little more of what that's going to look like. Now the deform is when it takes the groom and applies it to the deforming geometry. So that's got a certain look there. Now the next thing we're going to do is we want to take that deform and we want to add some simulation to it. So it actually, the hair is responding to dynamics as the character's walking. So we add that, and it's going to add an extra node in. Just thinking for a little bit, and there we go. And you see already on frame 6 that the fur is drooped quite a bit. But we're going to go back to frame 1, and we don't want it to droop quite that much. So we're going to put on under constraints. We're going to go down to, well, there's stretch stiffness, but we're going to leave that as is. We're going to go down to bend stiffness, and we're going to change that to 5. And that just means that the hair won't droop completely, but it'll have a bit of a bounce to it. Now, once we have that, what we want to do is we want to create something to collide it with. In some cases, like we have the teeth and the eyeball theoretically, and the claws. So we want to make sure those things are not are collision objects for this. So we're going to go into here, and inside we made a copy of the FD anim. We're going to call this FD collision. And inside here, we're going to basically just do the opposite. So we're going to delete non-selected so we get everything. But we're also going to add a couple things in. We don't really need the tongue. And we don't need the upper teeth. And we don't need the gums. So just get rid of those because they wouldn't be impacting things anyway. So once we have those, we just put a null object at the bottom, and we're just going to call this collision out. So this is just to make sure that we don't have certain interpenetration of the hairs into these elements. And then we go back to the sim node, and under vellum collisions, and this could also be external collisions, like if you wanted him to brush against a wall, or you wanted him to, a ball was being thrown against him or something, the fur would react to that based on this. So anyway, collision out, but you could merge a bunch of things like that and connect them in. So now we're going to go to the caching area, and we're going to delete channels on the start end, and we're just going to go 1 to 50. And go back to frame 1, and we'll just play the whole thing through once. This will cache it in my timeline, and we can see. Now you see that there is some motion going on in the hair, but we're not getting the the drooping that we had before. So we're getting the advantage of the dynamics without it being a little too crazy. And you can play with the bend stiffness to decide exactly where you want that to be. Maybe you want a little more droopiness in yours. Once we get that, we'll save to disk. Let's change the name here. We're going to put it into geo hair, and then we'll just go furdude underscore hair. And there we go. Once we have that, we can save that to disk, and this will just cache it out so that later when we go to do the rendering phase, we don't have to worry about it cooking every time we move to a different frame. We'll be able to pull from the cache instead. And there we go. So now we have the motion all set up for this. Now what we want to do is go to the hair generation, and let's just increase that significantly. Let's put 1,000,000 density just to really get that a little thicker, and that'll be useful when we go to render down the line. And here we are. We can see it a little bit in the viewport, and that's what we will render.